Let's go ahead and talk about comparing fractions. When you compare fractions, you want to make sure that the fractions have the same denominator. And so if you have fractions with the same denominator, they're considered like fractions. Fractions that have different denominators are considered unlike fractions. And when you're comparing fractions, you want to make sure that they are like fractions, that they have the same denominators. That way you are comparing the same thing. If we look at a few examples, if we have 2/3, and if we want to compare 2/3 to 1/3, we want to take a look at the denominators, and we see that the denominators are both 3, so they are like fractions. And because they're like fractions, we can go ahead and we can compare them. And we remember that we have either the greater than sign, or we have the less than sign, or we have the equal sign. Because the denominators are the same, they're 3, we simply look at the top numbers, the numerators, and we see that 2 is greater than 1. So 2/3 is greater than 1/3. Let's try one more example where we have like fractions, and we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at 4/9 and 2/9. Again, they are like fractions because they have the same denominator. Both fractions have a 9, and because they are the same, we can simply look at the numerators, the 4 and the 2, and we see that the 4 is greater than the 2. Now, what happens when we don't have like fractions? For example, if we have a problem such as 1/3 and 1/2, we probably know that 1/3 is going to be less than 1/2, but how would we solve this finding like fractions? First, we're going to look at this and we're going to see that that 3 and the 2 are not the same. So we're going to have to do something about that. We have to make them into like fractions, and so we have to find a common denominator. Now, in order to do this, I like to write them up and down. So I'm going to take and write them this way: 1/3 and then 1/2. And I'm going to create equal fractions with a denominator of 6. Now, I chose 6 because I know that 3 is divisible into 6 as well as 2 is divisible into 6. So let's create some like fractions, and we know that 3 times 2 is 6, and so 1 times 2 is 2. And down below, we know that 2 times 3 is 6, and so 1 times 3 is 3. So what we've done is we've changed our 1/3 to 2/6, and we've changed our 1/2 to 3/6. Now when we look at our denominator, we can see that our denominators are the same. They're both 6. And when we compare our top number, 2 and 3, we know that 2 is less than 3. When you are comparing fractions, you need to make sure that they have common denominators. Let's try one more example. And if you like, you can go ahead and pause the video while you work through this example to determine whether or not it's greater than, less than, or equal. So the two fractions that we're going to compare is let's go ahead and let's compare 3/4. Let's compare that fraction to 9/16. And let's go ahead and work through it. We see that our denominators are not the same. We have a denominator of 4 and we have a denominator of 16. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make them like fractions. Again, I'm going to write them up and down. I'm going to scoot this down just a little bit 3/4, and we have 9/16. Now, when I look at this, I'm going to use a common denominator of 16. And so 4 times 4 is 16. 3 times 4 is 12. So we've changed 3/4 to 12/16. We look at 9/16, and 16 times 1 is 16, and so 9 times 1 is 9. And so this particular fraction is going to stay the same, 9/16. So now we're comparing the same thing. We see that both of our denominators are 16, and 12/16 is greater than 9/16.